Think the world's top economists have global poverty all figured out? Think again. For decades, the absolute smartest people in the room blamed African farmers for being terrible at their jobs. They looked at the spreadsheets, shook their heads, and pointed the finger at massive human inefficiency. Well, they were dead wrong. Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are completely shattering a multi-billion-dollar statistical illusion.
So, what exactly did these experts believe? Basically, they looked at the harvest numbers and concluded that African farmers were just flat out failing. The prevailing theory was honestly pretty arrogant. It was incredibly simple too. Just forcefully strip land away from the so-called bad farmers, hand it over to the good ones, and boom, incredible wealth will just magically follow.
But prepare yourself for a massive reality check. Decades of expensive global development policies were essentially built on a total lie. What if I told you that this massive inefficiency, the exact thing all these experts built their entire careers on fixing, was literally just a statistical mirage?
Let's zoom in on Uganda for a second. When researchers first pulled the data there, they found an absolutely mind-boggling gap. The top 10% of farmers were outperforming the bottom 10% by 24 times. Let that sink in. 24 times. Naturally, the experts completely panicked. They just assumed these poor farmers were wildly mismanaging their fields. To fix this supposed crisis, economists did what economists do best. They built these terrifying, overcomplicated mathematical models. They called it reallocation. The whole idea was to justify taking dirt from the inefficient to give to the efficient. But actually, scratch that. Their dense ivory tower math had a fatal flaw right from the very beginning.
Then came a completely brilliant, frankly common sense plot twist. The old, flawed method? It involved comparing totally different people. Farmer A versus Farmer B. But a new wave of researchers used a total genius trick. They stopped comparing neighbors altogether. Instead, they just tracked one single farmer who happened to be managing multiple plots of land at the exact same time.
The logic here is just absolutely undeniable. I mean, think about it. A farmer would never deliberately sabotage their own dirt. If a single person gets wildly different harvests on two of their very own plots, well, their management skills obviously aren't the problem. They certainly aren't sabotaging themselves.
And the data totally backs this up. Over 62% of farming plots in Uganda are actually subdivided and managed by a single person. That is a massive sample size. It's essentially the ultimate natural laboratory to test this theory out. And guess what? The old establishment theory completely and utterly failed the test.
All of this brings us to the ultimate mystery. If these farmers aren't just horribly messing up their own plots, why on earth does their harvest data look so unbelievably chaotic? If the humans aren't to blame, we really have to play detective here. Who are the real culprits? Let's actually walk through the timeline of a harvest. It turns out farmers make remarkably smart, totally rational plans at the start of the season. They put in the brutal physical labor. But right before the harvest, nature steps in and throws a massive, chaotic wrench right into the economists' perfect little spreadsheets.
These new researchers basically exposed three true villains that were totally ruining the data. Number one, sloppy data collection and bad record keeping. Number two, invisible, secret soil quality issues that satellites just can't see from space. And number three, brutal, unpredictable late-season weather and sudden pest attacks.
Okay, brace yourself, because here is the ultimate slap in the face to the old establishment. A massive 70% of that so-called inefficiency they desperately wanted to fix, it was literally just bad data and bad luck. Seriously, only a tiny, tiny fraction was actual human mismanagement.
See, those economists basically assumed a perfect world. They lived in a spreadsheet reality where perfect inputs magically equal perfect harvests. They completely ignored the messy, chaotic reality of the dirt. Things like sudden droughts, swarms of locusts, even bad GPS trackers warping the final numbers on the clipboard.
So, the crushing truth of the matter? You simply cannot spreadsheet your way out of poverty. You definitely can't just forcefully swap land around on paper, cross your fingers, and expect magical economic wealth to suddenly appear out of thin air. It just doesn't work that way.
The ultimate takedown of this whole reallocation theory is right there in the results. The experts loudly preached that swapping land would lead to these massive expected economic gains. But the actual ground-level reality? The gains were 3 to 4 times smaller. Their academic magic bullet was an absolute dud. The researchers put it incredibly bluntly. Moving dirt around simply does not fix a broken data thermometer. Reallocation does absolutely nothing to solve measurement error. And it definitely, 100%, does not stop a late-season drought or a sudden devastating swarm of pests.
Now, hold on just a second. We really need to keep our objective edge here. Just because the old arrogant theory was wildly wrong, that doesn't automatically mean everything in the fields is perfectly fine. African agriculture absolutely still faces massive, deep-rooted hurdles.
Because, even this incredibly groundbreaking study has its own fatal blind spots. It essentially assumes that current, primitive farming technology just stays static forever. It completely ignores the massive future impact of things like tractors. And it ignores the harsh reality that, frankly, some people should probably just transition out of farming entirely. The final conclusion is honestly a pretty sobering reality check. Tweaking the current broken system? Sure, it helps a little bit. It generates some non-trivial gains. But simply moving resources around the same game board, that will never, ever close the massive wealth gap between developing nations and the rich world.
Which leaves us with one incredibly provocative thought to wrap up this explainer. If the experts' shiny magic bullet of swapping land was essentially just a statistical illusion, how do we actually equip these farmers to conquer the unpredictable chaos of nature? What massive, dynamic tools do they actually need to finally thrive?